Want me to do the mic check?
Say that again? Yeah, go ahead and do the mic check.
Sure.
Mic check! Mic check! Mic check!
Mic check!
We have a guest speaker here!
We have a guest speaker here!
By the name of Robert Thurman!
By the name of Robert Thurman!
Come gather around if you'd like to hear!
Come gather around if you'd like to hear!
We're getting the live stream now!
We're getting the live stream now!
I see, that's the live stream. I see, are you going to say something?
I have to say forward. Hello, good afternoon! Hello, good afternoon!
My name is Eric.
My name is Eric.
Eric. My mother thinks I'm crazy for being here.
My mother thinks I'm crazy for being here.
I'm a doctor and I should be making money right now.
I'm a doctor and I should be making money right now.
But I believe what this man has to say can do more healing than what I can do in a doctor's office right now.
But I believe what this man has to say can do more healing than what I can do in a doctor's office right now.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Robert Thurman.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Robert Thurman.
Well, thank you, Eric.
Thank you, Eric.
Although you can heal more than just some words of mine, I'm sure.
Although you can heal more than just some words of mine, I'm sure.
You are a physical therapist, which we all need.
You are a physical therapist, which we all need.
I came down today at your invitation.
I came down today on your invitation.
Because I think everyone here is an example of what I've been wishing for many years.
Because I think that everyone here is an example of what I've been wishing for many years.
Namely what I call cool heroes.
Namely what I call cool heroes.
We need cool heroes today.
We need cool heroes today.
We don't need hot heroes.
We don't need hot heroes.
By cool, I mean nonviolent.
By cool, I mean nonviolent.
I mean those who can be forceful.
I mean those who can be forceful,
intelligent, just, and insightful, and speak up loudly and clearly, but without getting angry, or without indulging in hatred. Here we are at Liberty Plaza. And we're trying to keep liberty going on this planet. And actually this planet is in dire jeopardy. Because of the military-industrial machine that is beyond East and West. The industrial part has to do with organized greed. It expands the individual's limitless greed. With high-tech power. And is transcending the capacity of the planet. Pollution, global warming. Overpopulation. All comes from this technological expansion of greed. On the other side, you have hatred. Which necessarily goes along with greed. Because the greedy person hates the other greedy person. Who he assumes is trying to take away whatever he wants. So we need to control both of these problems. Therefore, in order to do that, every person has to control it inside their own mind. No one should be protesting against some nasty bankers. If they really truly do hate them. They are not worthy of being hated. They are just like us. They're just luckier at the moment.
They're just luckier at the moment.
And unluckier in the long run.
And unluckier in the long run.
Because they are taking away too much from too many.
Because they are taking away too much from too many.
And this makes them paranoid.
And this makes them paranoid.
They never can have any fun.
They never can have any fun.
Because they think you're going to pick their pocket.
Because they think they're going to pick your pocket.
And 1 billion is not enough.
And 1 billion is not enough.
They need 10.
They need 10.
When they get 10, they need 20.
When they get 10, they need 20.
When they got 20, they want 100.
They get 20, they want 100.
And by that time, they're reduced to a pile of shivering paranoia.
They're reduced to a pile of shivering paranoia.
Trying to hold everything clutched with them in some sort of plastic germ-free bag like Howard Hughes. If they're male by then, they're on their 4th trophy wife.
If they're male, then they're on their 4th trophy wife.
Their kids can't stand them.
Their kids can't stand them.
And they're literally afraid of everyone.
And they're literally afraid of everyone.
Therefore, we have to be sympathetic to them.
Therefore, we have to be sympathetic to them.
We don't hate them.
We don't hate them.
We feel sorry for them.
We feel sorry for them.
I imagine none of them are out here protesting.
I imagine none of them are out here protesting.
Making new friends.
Making new friends.
Hanging out.
Hanging out.
Losing weight.
Losing weight.
Getting no good food.
Getting no good food.
Having to hold their pee until they find a restaurant.
Having to hold their pee until they find a restroom.
They're just uptight up in their offices.
They're just uptight up in their offices.
Pressing buttons on a computer screen.
Pressing buttons on a computer screen.
And the only relief they have
And the only relief they have
is going to some sort of squash court somewhere
is going to some sort of squash court somewhere
and viciously whipping each other.
and viciously whipping each other.
They really are objects of sympathy and compassion.
They really are objects of sympathy and compassion.
Actually, I think you all know this,
Actually, I think you all know this.
but maybe you just need encouragement about it.
But maybe you just need encouragement about it.
Back when they did the coup d'etat
Back when they did the coup d'etat
of our American free system,
of our American free system,
known as the Supreme Court Bush-Baker election hijacking of our beloved Al Gore,
known as the Supreme Court.
Beloved Al Gore.
ever since then, the people have been protesting peacefully and nonviolently.
Ever since then, the people have been protesting peacefully and non-violently.
When they were about to launch the criminal invasion of Iraq,
When they were about to launch the criminal invasion of Iraq,
people went to protest wheeling their children in baby carriages,
people went to protest wheeling their children in baby carriages,
carrying balloons,
carrying balloons,
dressed up with funny costumes.
dressed up with funny costumes.
In other words, a cool protest.
In other words, a cool protest.
Not a violent, brick-throwing, violent thing against violence, no.
Not a violent brick throwing against violence.
However, the problem is that the people who are able to protest peacefully, that is you people,
However, the problem is the people that are peacefully, that is you people.
you think somehow, you're happier than the violent people. Look at you, you're all smiling.
Look at you, you're all smiling.
You're only worried that the professor's going to say too many words,
You're only worried that the professor's going to say too many words
and you won't be able to hear.
and you won't be able to hear.
So you're actually cool in your own space.
You're actually cool in your own space.
You have an aura of liberty about you.
You have an aura of liberty about you.
That is your most precious thing that you show.
That is your most precious thing that you show.
Now, however, the corporatocracy has taken over the mass media and the electoral system, so they are defeating your will. Every poll says 70% of us want Social Security without problems. Want a single-payer medical system. Want to have banks and insurance companies realize they work for us. Service industries mean they serve us. We don't serve them. For example, insurance companies, they are community affairs. I think Ben Franklin started them. So that we share risk. We put our money in. And one of us breaks our leg. And the others make a very tiny contribution to the repair. And we hire Eric to do therapy. Right. But now, once they get our money, they start thinking it's their money. And then they want to invest and make more money. And then they don't want to pay us when we break our leg. So they hire people to tell us that you didn't break it in the right way. So we're not paying. So there they've captured our community mutual service association. And turned it into an instrument of oppression. But that's only one example. The health system is similar. There are many people who want to be doctors. Because they like to help their fellow people. But on purpose, they don't have enough medical schools. They make it too expensive. They force the students to take out huge loans. They keep them up 36 hours in a row. So they lose compassion for their patients. And then they just see the patients as so much meat. As part of the machine of making money. And they're no longer really fit to be doctors. And the nice people who really want to help others, they go out to become acupuncturists. And they have a problem getting a license. But actually they can help you more probably than the poisoners. The surgeons are really good, of course. Because they learned that in the Civil War, First World War, Korean War, because they're having to sew our poor soldiers back together.
Because they learned that in the First World War, the Second World War, the Korean War, to sew our soldiers back together.
But we normally don't really need such drastic things for what our problems are. So we should resist being shoved right away into the OR. And instead stop eating so many burgers. And French fries. And other greasy, disgusting food. Involving cruelty to animals. And cruelty to the workers in those horrible burger joints. What we need is good industrial jobs again like we used to have. Every $1 billion of our trade deficit is 20,000 good jobs, 6-figure or high 5-figure jobs.
It's 20,000 6-figure high-paying jobs.
The corporatocracy
The corporatocracy
are sort of a wimpy bunch of guys
are sort of a wimpy bunch of guys
with a couple of token girls
with a couple of token girls
who don't actually know how to make anything,
who actually don't know how to make anything,
but they know how to sign checks and push papers,
but they know how to sign checks and push papers,
which my pathetic university taught them,
which my pathetic university taught them,
without properly teaching them ethics,
without properly teaching them ethics,
or meditation, or sex therapy even,
or sex therapy,
or yoga, or how to have a decent life.
or how to have a decent life.
But the one thing they're good at
But the one thing they're good at
is not wanting to pay people to make things.
is not wanting to pay people to make things,
An honest wage,
an honest wage,
a decent job.
a decent job.
So they support dictatorships like China
So they support dictatorships like China
to keep slaves on tap for them,
to keep slaves on tap for them,
you know, $1 a day,
$1 a day,
so they can bust the unions here
so they can bust the unions here
and export all our jobs
and export all our jobs
and even get tax breaks for it.
and even get tax breaks for it.
This has to stop.
This has to stop.
You have to vote the Congress people who are corrupt
You have to vote the Congress people who are corrupt
out of office
out of office
so that 70% of the wishes of the American people
so that 70% of the wishes of the American people
will be honored by them.
will be honored by them.
They should serve their constituents,
They should serve their constituents,
which is you,
which is you,
and not their contributors,
and not their contributors,
which are the people up there in those buildings,
which are the people up there in those buildings,
who are the 1% or less,
who are the 1% or less,
and you are the 99% or the 70%.
and you are the 99% or the 70%.
So you just have to stand there peacefully insisting upon it,
So you just have to stand there peacefully insisting upon it,
and keep it clear in your understanding,
and keep it clear in your understanding.
and don't be brainwashed by political propaganda
Don't be brainwashed by political propaganda
like Fox News,
like Fox News,
like all of the Murdoch companies,
like all of the Murdoch companies,
which are just serving the few corporatocracy.
which are just serving the few corporatocracy.
And one of the things we really should do
One of the things we really should do
is we should impeach the Supreme Court
is we should impeach the Supreme Court
for criminal irrationality,
for criminal irrationality.
because a judge should be rational.
Because a judge should be rational.
They should be able to reason.
Should be able to reason.
Individual persons
Individual persons
form corporations
form corporations
originally for a good purpose,
originally for a good purpose,
to shield their personal assets,
to shield their personal assets,
their families, etc.,
their families, etc.,
in order to do entrepreneurial creative things
in order to do entrepreneurial creative things
and take risks.
and take risks.
And therefore, in a corporation, they forfeit their persona.
And therefore, in the corporation, they forfeit their persona.
Therefore, to reason that they are persons with free speech rights is criminally irrational.
Therefore, to reason that they are persons with free speech rights is criminally irrational.
There should be no corporate contributions to political campaigns, period.
There should be no corporate contributions to political campaigns.
Period.
Period. We should pay for them with taxes.
We should pay for them with taxes.
There should be free airtime on anybody who has the right to use our electronic commons.
There should be free airtime for anyone who wants the right to use our electronic commons.
And actually, all of the politicians should be on at least 4 hours a day for 6 months before every election.
Actually, all of the politicians should be on television.
Yes, they should be there at home.
They should be there at home.
They should be there speaking to their wives,
They should be there speaking to their wives,
their children, their employees, their friends. We should watch how they eat.
We should watch how they eat.
We should watch what they eat.
Watch what they eat.
By that time, we'll know who's a turkey and who isn't.
By that I will know who's a turkey and who isn't.
Subliminally, they will not be able to present themselves
Subliminally, they will not be able to present themselves
as cool
as cool
if they're freaks.
if they're freaks.
And unfortunately, most of them are freaks.
And unfortunately, most of them are freaks.
So just little commercials with makeup and yeah, I'm so cool. That's no good.
With makeup, you know.
So anyway, these are just a few examples of how.
These are just a few examples.
For example, I wrote a book called Inner Revolution
For example, I wrote a book called Inner Revolution
in the 1990s.
in the 1990s.
I wanted Al Gore to make a political platform out of the 10 planks that I put there.
I wanted Al Gore to make a political platform out of the 10 planks that I put there.
Of course, I failed,
Of course, I failed.
but Al Gore did win the election. We should remember that.
But Al Gore did win the election. We should remember that.
The reason they behaved so badly since then,
The reason they behaved so badly since then,
I mean the people who pretended they won,
I mean the people who pretended they won,
is because they knew they didn't win.
because they knew they didn't win.
And they resented you, the people, for not having elected them.
They resented you, the people, for not having elected them.
So therefore they abused you violently.
So therefore they abused you violently.
They spent $1.3 trillion so far in 2 useless wars.
They spent $1.3 trillion so far in 2 useless wars.
They did tax deductions for another trillion or so.
They did tax deductions for another trillion or so.
When you elected the poor, hapless Baraka,
When you elected the poor, hapless Baraka,
and I think even he was surprised,
and I think even he was surprised,
Michel definitely was,
Michelle definitely was,
and then he didn't know what, he was a deer in the headlights,
and he didn't know he was a deer in the headlights,
and so they then took the rest of the money away from him.
so they then took the rest of the money away from him.
Remember, the big crash happened during the transition.
Remember, the big crash happened during the transition.
Oh yeah, okay man, you're president.
Oh yeah, okay man, you're president.
All those Facebook, like iPhone wielding weirdo kids ran out to Pennsylvania.
Facebook, iPhone, kids ran out to Pennsylvania.
And they upset our candidates
And they upset our candidates
who work for us.
who work for us.
But hey, guess what?
But hey, guess what?
You haven't got a penny in the National Treasury.
You haven't got a penny in the National Treasury.
So you work for us now.
So you work for us now.
So then poor Barack
So then poor Barack
went to work
went to work
for Larry Summers
for Larry Summers
and Tim Geithner
and Tim Geithner
and Robert Rubin.
and Robert Rubin.
And look at this is the result.
And look at this is the result.
So now you are rising.
So now you are rising.
You are making your voices heard.
You are making your voices heard.
The difficulty is going to be to sustain it.
The difficulty is going to be to sustain it.
It is like you have to be as smart and as durable as the Ukrainians.
It's like you get as smart and as durable as the Ukrainians.
Remember the Orange Revolution?
Remember the Orange Revolution?
They were not violent,
They were not violent,
but they stayed out there in the public square.
but they stayed out there in the public
If
square.
everybody stays out there,
If everybody stays out there,
then those guys will have to themselves go abroad.
then those guys themselves will have to go abroad.
We should outsource all the bankers
We should outsource all the bankers
and then bring back the workers
and then bring back the workers
and pay them decent wages.
and pay them decent wages.
And the bankers, when they get outsourced, they can't really take all the billions with them.
And the bankers, when they get outsourced, they can't take all the billions with them.
100 million should be enough.
100 million should be enough.
Who can spend that much money
Who can spend that much money
on anything worthwhile?
on anything worthwhile?
So to do that, you have to stand. We all have to stand here
So to do that, we all have to stand here
in one way or another, until they start following what the polls tell them. 70, 75, 85% of the people want.
70, 75, 85% of the people want.
This is supposed to be a democracy.
This is supposed to be a democracy.
The people in our Congress
The people in our Congress
are all multimillionaires. They only have their own crony system.
They only have their own crony system.
They look down on us.
They look down on us.
Actually, they look down on the people who live in Washington, D.C.
Actually, they look down on the people who live in Washington, D.C.
They are surrounded by one of the poorest, most violent, crime-ridden places in the country.
They are surrounded by one of the most violent,
And they drive by it in their high-security limos.
they drive by it in their high-security limos.
So they have lost touch
So they have lost touch
with us, with you. And our democracy is no really better than the Egyptian one
And our democracy is no really better than the Egyptian one
before the Arab Spring.
before the Arab Spring.
So this is the task before us. It is huge.
So this is the task before us. It's huge.
And it is global.
And it is global.
Because believe me,
Because believe me,
every Tibetan monk
every Tibetan monk
who of 18 years of age,
of 18 years of
who
age
doesn't really know Buddhism yet even,
doesn't really know Buddhism yet even,
and yet feels so oppressed by the Chinese dictatorship
and yet feels so oppressed by the Chinese dictatorship
that he burns himself to death like a human torch.
he burns himself to death like a human torch.
His only hope, which he speaks of
His only hope, which he speaks of,
to his mates in the dorm,
to his mates in the dorm,
before he did that,
before he did that,
was America still is free.
was America still is free.
America will not back these kind of dictators.
America will not back these kinds of dictators.
You can find it in the biographies of political prisoners in Russia and China in the past.
You can find it in the biographies of political prisoners of Russia and China in the past.
Actually, Russia in the past, China in the present.
Actually, Russia in the past, China in the present.
And when Nixon went to China, for example,
When Nixon went to China, for example,
so Kissinger could grovel to Mao,
so Kissinger could grovel to Mao.
the prison guards in those prison camps,
The prison guards in those prison camps,
within one day,
they
went and poked the prisoners with their bayonets.
went and poked the prisoners with their bayonets.
And now see what the United States is going to do for you.
Now see what the United States is going to do for you.
Land of the free,
Land of the free,
home of the brave,
home of the brave,
kowtowing to a communist dictator.
kowtowing to a communist dictator.
So that's just a small example
So that's just a small example.
that your voice here today,
And your voice here today,
during your human microphone,
doing your human microphone,
is heard worldwide.
is heard worldwide.
But
But
against it
against it
is the whole TV nation.
is the whole TV nation.
Maybe MSNBC, a few programs.
Maybe MSNBC, a few programs.
Maybe Link TV.
Maybe Link TV.
Maybe Democracy Now.
Maybe Democracy Now.
But they don't reach into the bar rooms
But they don't reach into the bar room
in Indiana,
in Indiana,
in the airport waiting rooms,
in the airport waiting
in the hospital rooms,
in hospital rooms,
everywhere.
everywhere.
All the networks,
All the networks,
all the Fox News,
all the Fox
which
News,
is pure propaganda and lies.
propaganda and lies.
I call it Goebbels' wet dream.
I call it Goebbels' wet dream.
17 hours a day in American homes,
17 hours a day in American homes,
giving our brave compatriots,
giving our brave compatriots,
good, kind people all over the country,
good, kind people all over the country,
a completely distorted vision of what is reality going on here now.
completely distorted vision of what is reality going on here now.
So to break through that, you need to really be persistent.
So to break through that, you really need to be persistent.
And a great danger, by the way. You must beware of anyone who seems to join your ranks.
You must beware of anyone who seems to join your ranks.
And is too hot. Preaches hatred. Thinks there's one bunch of people who are really the bad guys. I told you, those bankers themselves are victims. They are doing evil, of course, now. But they are helpless victims of their own greed. And a system that allows them to magnify it beyond their control. The American system. The real Constitution. Separation of church and state. The yearly relicensing of corporation by state governments. Every year. Whatever locality they work in, they have to be examined by that state. If they're polluting the rivers, if they're harming the citizens, if they're abusing their workers, that state has the right to revoke their corporate license. That is how it was originally. From the time of the Constitution. And they defeated that gradually, civil war, especially using warfare as the excuse.
And they gradually defeated that with the Civil War, using war as the excuse.
The armies of lawyers. And they pretend now that they're people. So you and I, and our couple of $100 we can contribute. Or maybe 20 or 50. We're up against General Motors. Bank of America. And who can contribute billions. And they do. To buy our representatives. And even to buy our president. I don't think they bother with the vice president. There have to be a few people who seem to be free. To lull us into complacency. Which temporarily now, you all are not doing. Which is really good. And you must keep it up. And no violence. And in that light, we must all meditate every day. But not just some I don't think anything. Oh, I feel so good I didn't think. That can be nice, like a Prozac or something. But it can be a little addictive. And it doesn't really bring you insight. And it dulls your compassion. And dulls your intelligence. Which is what you really need. And so when you meditate, think about compassion. Think that here we are free to spend our time. Envisioning a happier world. A world like what Jeff Sachs is working for. He was down here, I think, the other day. In the Earth Institute. Talking about gross national happiness. I like to think of fine national happiness myself. But the gross is a play on gross GDP, gross domestic product. So gross national happiness means everybody should be fair paid. There should be zero unemployment.
There should be zero unemployment.
There is no need for that. People like to work.
There is no need for that. People like to work.
It would be perfectly nice for them to do. There's all kinds of things that we could do here.
It would be perfectly nice.
There's all kinds of nice things we can do here.
There's plenty of money going moldy in all these bank vaults here.
There's plenty of money going moldy in all these things here.
They're always printing more even,
They're always printing more even.
in case they raise the minimum wage.
In case they raise the minimum wage,
They then print more to lower its value.
they then print more to lower its value.
My point is, and then some business persons,
And then some business persons,
shouldn't be allowed to graduate from my university or any other one,
they shouldn't be able to graduate from my university or any other one,
or any business school,
or any business school,
without getting a real course in ethics
without getting a real course in ethics
and learning what enlightened self-interest means
and learning what enlightened self-interest means,
in receiving extensive preemptive marriage counseling
and receiving extensive preemptive marriage counseling
and child rearing
and child rearing
and personal meditative emotional skill
and personal meditative emotional skills
to cultivate true contentment.
to cultivate true contentment.
So that one of the things on the diploma is,
One of the things on the diploma is,
how happy are you really?
how happy are you really?
And you shouldn't let anybody out of school
And you shouldn't let anybody out of school.
who's like, let me out of here, I gotta go make $1 billion. Then with my $1 billion, I'm going to the Playboy Club. And they'll do weird, kinky sex.
Kinky sex.
Because I'm so frustrated. Instead of that, happiness becomes a necessary qualification. They have to get up and tell jokes.
They have to get up and tell jokes.
And if they bomb, they go back to school.
And if they bomb, they go back to school.
Actually, they never could have robbed Al Gore
Actually, they never could have robbed Al Gore
if it was necessary training for a politician
if it was necessary training for a politician
to do stand-up comedy for 6 months
to do stand-up comedy for 6 months
at all levels of the social spectrum.
at all levels of the social spectrum.
Harlem Comedy Club
Harlem Comedy Club
and the Country Club at Jupiter Island.
and the Country Club at Jupiter Island.
Actually, Johnny Carson made a great joke about that.
Actually, John Carson made a great joke about that.
You know, Jupiter Island is where the Bush gang hangs out, in case you didn't know.
Where the Bush gang hangs out.
And Johnny Carson rented a house near it for one vacation he took in Florida.
Johnny Carson rented a house here for one vacation in Florida.
And afterwards he made a joke.
Afterwards, he made a joke.
What's the difference between Jupiter Island and Jupiter?
What's the difference between Jupiter Island and Jupiter?
There may be signs of life on Jupiter.
There may be signs of life on Jupiter.
And that was before the Avatar.
That was before the Avatar.
Okay, so anyway, I think I've wasted your time long enough.
Okay, so I think I wasted your time long enough.
But anyway, if you have any question, anybody, you can ask any question or whatever you like. You can ask me about my planks. Like one of my favorite planks. I won't tell a story. Okay. One of my favorite planks in my Enlightenment party,
One of my favorite planks in my Enlightenment party,
which I also put down in Obama's briefing book during the transition,
which I also put down in Obama's briefing book during the transition
online.
online.
And I noticed hundreds of thousands of people also did.
And I noticed hundreds of thousands of people also did.
But the people managing it
But the people managing it
kept putting it in the back
kept putting it in the back
instead of making it a top priority as they pretended.
instead of making it a top priority as they pretended.
And guess what that plank was?
Guess what that plank was?
Abolish the drug war.
Abolish the drug war
Right away.
right away.
It is It's a waste of many billions of dollars.
It's a waste of many billions of dollars.
It only enriches criminals.
It only enriches criminals.
It has destroyed Mexico,
It has destroyed Mexico,
Colombia, Peru, Bolivia, and it's still a booming business.
It's still a booming business.
Except that it's too expensive.
Except that it's too expensive.
And then the other business is the Drug Enforcement Agency,
And the other business is the drug enforcement.
a multi-billion-dollar operation.
Multi-billion-dollar operation.
And like the guys in Miami Vice, they all drive Ferraris for crying out
The
loud.
guys in Miami Vice, they all drive Ferraris.
That's ridiculous.
That's ridiculous.
So we medicalize it with a free medical system.
Medicalize it with a free medical system.
That's one of the planks.
That's one of the planks.
Anyway, any question?
Anyway, what's your question?
Yes. Yes. You have to repeat the question. Like,
Mike, check.
When are mainstream Buddhist leaders going to speak out against cults that practice obsessive recruitment?
excessive recruitment? You mean,
Like who?
I'm sorry, I can't actually hear you. I have to.
Come up closer so you can talk.
Yeah, you have a longer question apparently. Yeah.
When are mainstream Buddhist leaders going to speak out and warn idealistic audiences like this about cults that practice obsessive recruitment, like Werner Erhard and the Nichiren Shoshus?
Well, Werner Erhard is not a Buddhist. I don't even know where is Werner Erhard. Where is Werner Erhard?
I don't know.
I have no idea. He was not a Buddhist. I think Buddhist leaders do speak out about it, but like you all nonviolent people, they have this kind of idea that, well, I shouldn't speak loud. You know, I shouldn't raise my voice. I shouldn't, you know, that might be violent or something, thought of as violent. So they kind of like try to be low profile.
Mic check. Did mic check.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Mic check.
In other words, the Buddhists, like the nonviolent protesters and cool heroes, have the idea that to speak forcefully is somehow going to be disruptive. So they tend not to do that. I think maybe they might begin to do that a bit more. I'm not a leader. But I'm here. And it looks like you are too. And with a goatee like that, you must be a Buddhist. Actually, I'd like to know one other thing. Which your question makes me think of. I wanted to say today. Where is the sweetness of Jesus Christ in this country?
Where is the sweetness of Jesus Christ in this country?
He said
that
that these bankers with their $100 million salaries, they have less chance to get to heaven than a camel through the eye of a needle. He consorted with the poor, the downtrodden, the abused, and he put his life on the line for them. And yet we hear these so-called Christians talking about onward Christian soldiers, talking about destroying all Muslims, talking about all kinds of violence, talking about destroying welfare, showing hostility to the poor, to the sick, to the injured, to the oppressed. What's Christian about that? Jesus was the sweetest. Every Buddhist worth their salt
Every Buddhist with their soul
loves Jesus.
loves Jesus.
Muhammad loved Jesus.
Muhammad loved Jesus.
He was inspired by him.
Was inspired by him.
So what is the problem?
So what is the problem?
Why the violence in Jesus' name?
Why the violence in Jesus' name?
And why aren't the so-called liberal Christians,
And why aren't the so-called liberal Christians,
Harvard Divinity School, Yale, Chicago, Graduate Union, whatever, why aren't they on the case
why are they on the case
of Christian dominionists?
of Christian dominionists?
You know what that is?
You know what that is?
That's a subgroup of the Baptists
That's a subgroup of the Baptists
that argue that Christians are supposed to rule with force.
that argue that Christians are supposed to rule with force.
Michelle Bachmann,
Michelle Bachmann,
Rick Perry,
Rick Perry,
they are members of that cult.
they are members of that cult.
Why aren't liberal Christians calling them out?
Why are liberal Christians calling them out?
Normally I would not,
Normally I would not,
because I'm not a Christian,
because I'm not a Christian.
and it would be considered intolerant.
It would be considered intolerant.
But in a general context, in a peaceful way,
In a general context, in a peaceful way,
intelligence
intelligence
and insight
and insight
should bring up the Tolstoy type of Christian,
should bring up the Tolstoy type of Christian,
the Thoreau type of Christian.
the Thoreau type of Christian.
Gandhi was inspired by such Christians.
Gandhi was inspired by such Christians.
Mark Twain was such a Christian.
Mark Twain was such a Christian.
And what you are doing
And what you are doing
here
here
is what Christ would be doing,
is what Christ would be doing,
whether you are Christian or not.
whether you are Christian or not.
So let's hear it for the sweetness of Jesus.
So let's hear it for the sweetness of Jesus.
And all those people
And all those people
in all those churches
in all those churches
all over the Middle West
all over the Middle West
and in the mega churches
and in the mega
in
churches
California,
in California.
let them hear
Let them hear
that the Ows people,
that the House people,
they want to see Jesus' will done
they want to see Jesus' will done
in a free country
in a free country
by kind people,
by kind people,
caring people,
caring people,
loving people,
loving people,
self-sacrificing people.
self-sacrificing people.
They don't want to hear about violence in Jesus' name.
They don't want to hear about violence in Jesus' name.
That is a perversion.
That is a perversion
And that dishonors Jesus.
that dishonors Jesus.
And if they read Matthew,
And if they read Matthew
right after the Sermon on the Mount,
right after the Sermon on the Mount,
Jesus says
Jesus says
that some people will come to him after he dies, when he's at the right hand of the Father,
that some people will come to him after he dies and he's at
the right hand of the Father, and they will say, Lord, Lord,
and they will say, Lord, Lord,
we did great deeds of power
we did great deeds of power
in thy name.
in thy name
We cast out devils,
to cast out devils.
and we did blah, blah, blah,
We did blah, blah, blah.
and we invaded Iraq,
And we invaded Iraq
and so on,
and so on.
and we chased the Muslims out of the World Trade Center.
And we chased the Muslims out of the World Trade Center.
So now we want into heaven.
So now we want into heaven.
And Jesus says in that scripture,
And Jesus says in that scripture,
I know ye not.
I know ye not.
Ye did not do what I said in the Sermon on the Mount.
You did not do what I said on the Sermon on the Mount.
Get thee gone,
Get thee gone,
ye evildoers.
ye evildoers.
That's what he said.
That's what he said.
I did send that in the form of a telegram
I didn't send that out in form of a telegram
to Dick Cheney when he was in the White House.
to Dick Cheney when he was in the White House.
But I doubt if he read it.
But I doubt if he read
But
it.
I wanted to tell you that
But I wanted to tell you that
because we are with good Christians.
because we are with good Christians.
Nonviolence is the name of Jesus' game.
Nonviolence is the name of Jesus' game.
If there ever was someone nonviolent,
If there ever was someone nonviolent,
like, what is that?
what is
That? That is like, do your worst.
That is like do your worst.
You cannot destroy love.
You cannot destroy love.
That doesn't mean I want revenge on somebody.
That doesn't mean I want revenge on somebody.
Right?
Right?
Everybody agree?
Everybody agree.
All right. All right. Any other
I have a
question?
question about problem solving within our own group.
Is that another question?
Yeah, problem solving within our own group.
We have meetings at 7 o'clock, a General Assembly.
Yes.
And we make some decisions here. And we had decided that maybe it would be good if we all came together and talked instead of there being a General Assembly of most of us and then a few people making loud noises on the other side, drumming and so forth.
Yes.
So this decision has not been very much respected, but what is a nonviolent solution to help encourage people to fully participate as a group, where some people want to continue protesting in their own way and don't
Right.
hear any other...
Right. Well, you know, the only thing is the line is violence of some kind.
Mike check.
The line is violence.
The line is violence.
As long as people are not violent
As long as people are not violent
in Liberty Square,
in Liberty Square,
you kind of have to let them do what they want.
you kind of have to let them do what they want.
But the key is in your group assembly,
But the key is in your group assembly.
have so much fun.
Have so much fun.
They can't resist.
They can't resist.
This is supposed to be fun.
This is supposed to be fun.
Listen, the French Revolution
The French Revolution
was hot and violent,
was hot and violent,
and they killed a lot of amusing aristocrats.
and they killed a lot of amusing aristocrats.
The Russian Revolution,
Russian Revolution
that was also hot and violent.
was also hot and violent,
And the new leaders became worse than the old ones,
and the new leaders became worse than the old ones.
and with a much less good fashion sense.
Much less good fashion sense.
And so this time, the final completion of the American Revolution,
So this time, the final completion of the American Revolution,
which was global,
which was global,
has to be fun,
has to be fun,
non-violent, humorous,
humorous,
determined while cool.
determined while cool.
Okay, that's what it has to be, because only, as my friend Deepak says, as Gandhi said, as Deepak says,
As Deepak says,
as Gandhi says,
as Gandhi says,
peace has to be the path to peace.
peace has to be the path to peace.
Violence will never be the path to peace.
Violence will never be the path to peace.
Buddha said 2,500 years ago, hatred,
Said 2,500 years ago,
hatred will not put an end to hatred.
hatred will not put an end to hatred.
Only non-hatred and love will put an end to hatred.
Only non-hatred and love will put an end to hatred.
Jesus said, who lives by the sword will die by the sword.
Jesus said, who lives by the sword will die by the sword.
So enough of these missiles
So enough of these missiles.
with peacemaker put on the nose cone.
With the peacemaker put on the nose cone.
All right, so here in Liberty Square,
Liberty Square.
if they want to drum,
If they want to
drum up a storm.
drum up a storm.
I've got a question.
Yeah.
What could you imagine would be a very powerful, beautiful symbol
Mic check.
A very powerful, beautiful symbol.
to put on Wall Street
Put on Wall Street
when we overtake it?
when we overtake it.
Well,
It's hard to imagine something on the spot, but
I think all great symbols, you know,
All great symbols.
I think you could use Jesus. You could use Jesus.
I think you could use
You
Jesus.
could use Buddha.
You could use Buddha.
You could use some Islamic symbol,
You could use some Islamic symbol.
some Jewish symbol,
Jewish symbol.
Star of David or Seal of Solomon, whatever you want to call it, which happens to be a Shiva Shakti symbol in Hinduism. I'd use all the religious symbols, and because this is a spiritual movement, cool heroism.
cool heroism.
And I would use the peace thing, you know, the 60s peace thing.
It's the 60s piece there.
And then there's some green earth trips, you know,
There's some green earth trips, you know.
all that kind of thing.
All that kind of thing.
But it doesn't really matter. Now, about you said take over, though.
Yeah, you're right.
I want to say this.
I want to say this.
Capitalism itself is not the problem.
Capitalism itself is not the problem.
You saw what communism led to.
You saw what communism led to.
Dictatorship of the proletariat
Dictatorship of the proletariat
turned into just plain dictatorship.
turned into just plain dictatorship.
Tens of millions, or over 100 million between Mao and Stalin, over 100 million unnecessarily killed people.
Over 100 million unnecessarily killed people
Between Mao and Stalin.
between Mao and Stalin.
So that's not an alternative.
That's not an alternative.
Capitalism originally means self-restraint.
Means self-restraint.
Capital accumulates,
Capital accumulates,
even in Marx's analysis,
even in Marx's analysis,
by a person who earns some money,
by a person who earns some money,
not consuming it,
not consuming it,
and saving it,
and saving it,
and investing it in more productivity
investing it in more productivity
for the benefit of others
for the benefit of others
and future generations.
and future generations.
The great sociologist Max Weber
The great sociologist Max Weber
traced the selfless work ethic
traced the selfless work ethic
of true capitalism
of true capitalism
to the European monastery,
to the European monastery,
where those monks and nuns
where those monks and nuns
made beautiful paintings,
made beautiful paintings,
champagne,
champagne,
beer,
beer,
jam,
jam,
groves, property,
property,
crops,
crops,
manuscripts,
manuscripts,
whatever,
whatever,
fab music,
music,
beautiful things,
beautiful things,
without personally owning any of the profits
not personally owning any of the profits,
as an offering to God.
as an offering to God,
Work as a spiritual practice.
work as a spiritual practice.
So that is true capitalism.
So that is true capitalism.
And therefore, the function of banks and Wall Street,
And therefore, the function of banks and Wall Street,
when restrained
when restrained
by selfless ethics,
by selfless ethics,
by a Glass-Steagall Act when ethics is not enough,
by the Glass-Steagall Act when ethics is not enough,
by a real Securities and Exchange Commission,
by a real Securities and Exchange Commission,
by a trust-busting Congress,
by a trust-busting Congress,
etc., who are not for sale,
etc., who are not for sale,
then it's creative.
then it's creative.
Then it makes for invention.
Then it makes for invention.
You know, Steve Jobs.
So Steve Jobs,
You know, Lawrence Rockefeller once told me he was one of the first investors in Stephen Jobs' Apple computer.
Lawrence Rockefeller once told me he was one of the first investors in Steve Jobs.
And I didn't check it, but I believe him.
And I didn't check it, but I believe him.
And then there are then the Gates Foundation. Then there are many things they are doing in Africa.
And there's the Gates Foundation. There are many things they're doing in Africa.
So we don't want the movement to be identified
So we don't want the movement to be identified
with some sort of simplistic, you know, communalistic thing that is unrealistic.
as some simplistic communal thing that is unrealistic.
The point is, what these people are doing now,
The point is, what these people are doing now,
the people who I call
the people who I call
banker robbers,
banker robbers,
not bank robbers,
not bank robbers,
but banker robbers.
but banker robbers.
These guys are doing something that is not capitalism.
These guys are doing something that is not capitalism.
They are gaming the system.
They're gaming the system.
They are running a casino
They're running a casino
where they are the house
where they are the house
and they win every bet.
and they win every bet.
Therefore, there is no risk.
Therefore, there's no risk.
Therefore, there should be no such reward.
Therefore, there should be no such reward.
And they are hiding behind faceless, inhuman corporations.
And they are hiding behind faceless, inhuman corporations.
And those are the ones we are peacefully
And those are the ones we are
but
peacefully,
forcefully
forcefully
calling out
calling out
so we can get back to good old Swedish socialistic capitalism.
so we can get back to good old Swedish socialistic capitalism.
My wife is Swedish.
My wife is Swedish. Congratulations.
And we took a lot of abuse from these people over the years at dinner parties. But
We took a lot of abuse from these people over the dinner party.
when they heard she was Swedish,
When they heard she was Swedish,
and they immediately started attacking the Swedish socialists.
and they immediately started attacking the Swedish socialists.
So let's be clear.
So let's be clear.
We also want to liberate the bankers.
We also want to liberate the bankers.
We have compassion for them.
We have compassion for them.
We'd like them to get out from behind their paper-pushing desk jockeying
We'd like them to get out from behind their paper-pushing desk jockeying.
spend more quality time with the fam,
Spend more quality time with the fam.
have a few less billions to worry about,
Have a few less billions to worry about.
so they don't have to be constantly consuming,
Constantly consuming
aspirin all the time,
aspirin all the time.
and get them on a vegan diet
Get them on a vegan diet.
so they don't have heart attacks,
They don't have heart attacks.
they don't need pacemakers,
They don't need pacemakers.
and they can get back to their youthful happy days.
And they can get back to their youthful happy days.
Feel unafraid of the people.
Feel unafraid of the people.
Okay, that's what we want. And we are very proud and happy,
And we're very proud and happy.
sort of intellectuals who are, Marx defined as proletarians,
Marx defined as proletarian
and students,
and students
and health healing people,
and health healing people
and the brave and great workers of America
and the brave and great workers of America
who make the most beautiful and creative things. Are capable of that,
who make the most beautiful and creative things are capable of
and should have their workstations back,
and should have their workstations back
and their salaries,
and their salaries
and their benefits,
and their benefits,
and the corporation should return
and the corporation should return
to the Japanese family model,
to the Japanese family model,
where these people become lifetime loyal,
where these people become lifetime loyal,
creative, taken care of, and making beautiful things that they're proud of,
and making beautiful things that they are proud of,
that we love,
That we love.
and forget all these instruments of violence.
and forget all these instruments of violence.
Slowly but surely disarm
Slowly but surely disarm.
and make things that are more useful.
And make things that are more useful.
Okay? So that's it. Global, turn gross national happiness into global, and at that time, when we have that here,
And at that time, when we have that here,
when our workers are better taken care of,
when our workers are better taken care of,
the enslaved workers in the communist dictatorship of China,
The enslaved workers in the communist dictatorship of China.
they will find their freedom as well.
They will find their freedom as well.
And they will be able to form unions.
They will be able to form a union.
And they'll be able to get back to their Buddhist practice.
They will be able to get back to their Buddhist practice.
And they will be able to have the Dalai Lama in Tiananmen Square,
And they will be able to have the Dalai Lama in Tiananmen Square.
giving empowerment to love and kindness
Giving empowerment to love and kindness.
and good humor.
And good humor.
Okay?
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.